2019's Fallout 76-like disaster is Google Stadia, a streaming platform that really doesn't have demand or even an audience. Now, to be fair, there probably could be a case made that 2019's quote-unquote Fallout 76 is none other than Fallout 76. Bethesda Game Studios certainly has done a phenomenal job at doing the exact opposite of what everyone wanted throughout this year, with even more bugs, greed, and lies, plaguing a game that was hated by most at release, and now I really don't know how to properly describe what Fallout 76 has become. With that said, there probably could also be a case made for other AAA games like BioWare's Anthem, Ubisoft's Ghost Recon Breakpoint, or even Bethesda's Wolfenstein Youngblood. But regardless, the fact that we're seeing more and more unfinished trash, mostly live service games is concerning, and now I suppose we see that in the form of a gaming platform. Today is Google Stadia's launch day, and as you might have already expected, this train wreck is in fact a train wreck. And we have a lot of different issues regarding this platform that we'll be discussing, but additionally, there are some other gaming news topics that we are going to be going over, including some shady business that the executives of Electronic Arts and Activision Blizzard have been taking part in, the leak that Bioshock 4 may be a live service experience, Valve's giant announcement, and my impressions of the game that currently is in the background. So a lot of stuff to discuss, but if you do go on to enjoy this content and want to show your support for gaming news coverage like this, please consider hitting that like button, subscribing for more, and turning notifications on so you do not miss out on any new videos. Also, I finally have some new merch available, including the Surprise Mechanics design. As always, links are in the description down below, but nonetheless, we're going to start with everything that is happening with Google Stadia. See, I haven't really discussed this platform in video form, but on Twitter for months I've been sharing my skepticism because everything about this platform has been triggering my own personal red flags. It really does seem that Google is ignorant and knew that they were launching a gaming platform that definitely needs more work and is by definition unfinished. Google Stadia should be in beta, not charging at the very least $130 plus. If you actually want the full streaming experience, there's the usual $10 subscription service. And then on top of that, you will have to buy games full price. But hey, the one benefit I suppose is there's no huge gaming rig or console or even download. Even with that benefit, the question many have wondered for months is how bad will latency be? And for the most part, the answer has been quite clear for some time. Google Stadia runs games, but not very well. Back months ago, members of the press got a look at Stadia and the problems were obvious then, that are plaguing many today. TechCrunch noted that when they began playing 2016's Doom, the frame rate dropped to a fast-paced PowerPoint presentation. The resolution dipped between 4K crispness and indecipherable blurriness, and latency seemed to be as much as a half a second. Nervous Google employees then restarted Stadia and it ran smoothly, but the defining line is, when it comes to game streaming, things can be unpredictable. Other previews from other outlets, including PC Gamer, made the same point, that it works but can be one moment perfectly smooth, the next moment a laggy mess. This is just one reason why I knew this was going to be a train wreck, and also remember that most of these previews took place in I believe Google's headquarters that's located just outside of San Francisco, which has always called into question how this will run in other more rural parts of the world. Building off that question is the worry of data caps, which in some parts of the world is still something many have to deal with, and thus far the only answer Google has given is to have faith in the generous, always thinking about consumers, internet service providers. Google VP Phil Harrison telling GameSpot in June, ISPs are smart and they understand that they are in the business of keeping customers happy and keeping customers with them for a long time. Now, on the concern of latency, Google has thus far said that they are working to achieve negative latency. Their words, not mine. Google Vice President of Engineering, can't say his name, he told Edge Magazine last month, ultimately we think in a year or two we'll have games that are running faster and feel more responsive in the cloud than they do locally, regardless of how powerful the local machine is. But another concern, which really will decide if Stadia takes off, is games. And the launch lineup, which originally was 12 games, is now 22, although even with that increase, besides one smaller game from Tequila Gameworks, these are all a bunch of previously released games that most likely you've already played or you can get on other gaming platforms for a deep discount. For what it's worth, Google has set up a first-party studio with former EA executive Jade Raymond leading it, but game development takes a long time, and just one game from this one studio could take years. Additionally, if you have not heard, Google held a Reddit AMA recently, and it went probably as you might expect. Journalist Russell Hawley perfectly outlined the highlights, which includes Google's Stadia team saying they'll hand-deliver kits for those living in the Bay Area to make up for shipping confusion, something that's plaguing a lot of people worldwide. The achievement system will not have a user interface at launch, but will still be tracking. Existing Chromecast Ultras will not be supported day one. Family sharing is not going to work day one, but the Stadia team recommends buying a game more than once for different accounts because that makes complete sense. Stadia on iOS has an ETA of quote-unquote, "Oh man, I wish I knew." You'll need your phone at launch to buy games, as there does not appear to be a web user interface set up yet. Stadia Buddy Pass, which is supposed to be a feature for those buying the Founders Edition, will of course not be available day one. Accessibility features are still in the planning stage. A phone mount for the Stadia controller will be available weeks after launch, and honestly, hopefully you have the same reaction as I do to all of this. Why is Google releasing this now? Stadia clearly is not ready, and this just feels like a disaster that they expect and are embracing, which is even more concerning. I mean, is the goal with Stadia to capitalize on the holiday shoppers, which are likely more casual gamers, who will fall for this charade? Because that seems like the goal. Anyway, today is launch day and the reviews are not at all shocking. You have the Washington Post saying Google Stadia is a great concept for the next generation of gaming, but its input lag, which is variable, makes it nearly unplayable. And they also shared a clip of the terrible lag, and all I can say is if you play any FPS, you pretty much are screwed. VentureBeat's Jeff Grubb had a different experience, saying Google Stadia is here and it has worked almost flawlessly for me. But one of the many problems with Stadia is that you and I are not guaranteed to get the same experience. The other problem is everything else. And he would continue on Twitter saying Google's greatest sin is that it has made a gaming platform that most hardcore gamers will find boring. No exclusives, no plans to release a big exclusive in the foreseeable future. Gamers spend a lot of money, but Google is giving no reason to do so. Paul Tassi of Forbes was the most critical, calling it a technical, conceptual disaster, further adding in his review, "This has been a catastrophe from start to finish during my testing phase, and the problem is that even if it did work flawlessly, which it absolutely doesn't, the entire model seemed doomed from the start. This is an enormous miss from Google, and I am really wondering what the fallout is going to be from this ill-conceived early launch." It's also worth mentioning that Paul Tassi resides in Ohio, which most of the other reviewers reside in Cali, which again calls into question how Stadia will run outside of the big metro areas. Another individual from France reported even more issues, noting that they ran into 4 seconds until response time and died 15 times in the first story mission of Destiny 2, which is notable because they have around 600 hours on the Steam version. Essentially, the verdict on Stadia seems to be that it works, although how well it works likely depends where you live, but beyond just latency, the approach Google has taken to rush this out the door unfinished with numerous features missing is honestly baffling, but also the perfect representation of this AAA gaming industry. Maybe Google is just doing their best to fit in, or not. But honestly, I recognize that cloud gaming likely is the future, but Stadia is way too early and going about all of this in the wrong way. It doesn't appear to be the answer. If anything, I have far more faith in their big competitor Microsoft's Project xCloud, which I believe is doing it the right way. Google seems to be approaching this with the vision of the future, and everyone who buys into that needs to have faith that eventually this is worth your time and money, which is perfectly what has defined the last few years of gaming, with unfinished live service disasters. Again, I've said this with Fallout 76 numerous times, if you're charging money, come launch day it should actually work and come with what's advertised. I absolutely despise companies having people buy into a potential future where their game or platform actually is worth it. Google Stadia just seems like the latest quote-unquote Fallout 76, and the sad part is, Google knows that. For what it's worth, like Fallout 76, it appears at launch Stadia is a flop. As Kotaku's Jason Schreier was reporting, Google Stadia is out today and it already looks like a monumental flop. I heard from one person involved that pre-orders were below expectations, which for those hopeful that things improve over the next number of years, you really just have to have faith that Google doesn't abandon it, like they have so many times over the years with other projects that flopped. Anyway, what can decide a bright future is a massive experience, a game that everyone wants to play, which for Stadia that could be a good 5 years away, which does create the question of if Google will wait that long or not. But one gaming company that appears to be just maybe pursuing innovation and pushing this gaming industry forward is Valve, who announced their first flagship virtual reality game, HalfLife Alyx, which definitely is intended to get people to buy more Steam VR headsets, but it very well may be finally a new proper Valve game and maybe even a new proper Half-Life experience. I really don't know what to expect. Could this be the Half-Life 3 that we've waited years for? Maybe, maybe not. The one interesting thing about Valve and their Half-Life games is that the first two titles in this franchise represented innovation, and hopefully that's what they're trying to do again with Alyx. Regardless, we'll be getting some big answers come Thursday, which for now, I'm remaining skeptical. The VR gaming scene is technically impressive, but the support from the big name publishers has been very lackluster, but maybe all that changes soon with an innovative, groundbreaking experience. We shall see. Besides Half-Life 3, another game that many have been waiting years for is the next Bioshock game, which I'm not sure if you call it Bioshock 3 or 4, but anyway, based on a report from Kotaku, it's been secretly in development since 2017, right next door to Mafia 3 developer Hangar 13. Up until this point, we didn't really know anything about the actual game, but we have known the original studio and mastermind Ken Levine have moved on. Earlier this week, it was reported that it appears that whatever this next Bioshock game is called, it will be a live service experience. Because of course it will be. A job listing was uncovered that has 2K Games looking for an endgame design lead in Novato, California, which is the location of 2K Games' secret studio working on this next Bioshock game. But the job listing does have some interesting details, including this description. The story itself will come to a conclusion. The world, by contrast, is something we are designing to be alive and engaging past the main narrative arc. To leverage this, we want to build a post-narrative set of systems, quests, and player progression that gives our fanatic fangirls and fanboys more content to experience on an ongoing live service basis. Which my honest opinion of this is very little surprise. Take-Two Interactive, the parent company, has an obsession of turning everything into a live service game, which is likely why Mafia 4 will also be a live service whenever that's announced. We can thank the success of Grand Theft Auto Online for this, but the original Bioshock team is gone, and the only reason why a new game is probably coming is because of how popular the franchise is, which this doesn't get discussed enough, but Take-Two is right up there with EA and Activision Blizzard with their nonsense. Like Take-Two Interactive has said that they want Rockstar Games, their big publishing developing giant, to deliver shorter single-player experiences and concentrate more on building the live service aspect at release, which honestly is the perfect representation of where the company wants to concentrate its efforts on in the future. So Bioshock Live Service makes sadly a lot of sense. Moving along, next, some of gaming's big publishers have been doing some shady business, which the Washington Post recently uncovered. The most notable example was Activision Blizzard, who announced a $1 billion buyback program in February of 2017. This was announced on February 9th, and by February 17th, 5 top Activision officials had sold shares for over $430 million, according to their SEC filings. Among them was CEO Bobby Kotick, who sold nearly 4 million shares for $180.8 million the day after the announcement, 15% higher than he would have sold them for before stock rose based on that news. Bobby Kotick's business partner and chairman of the board, Brian Kelly, sold over 5 million shares for $230.1 million. However, during the entire buyback program, Activision did not repurchase any of its shares. The same happened when the publisher announced a $750 million buyback in February of 2015. 2 years on, not one share had been purchased. Electronic Arts also appears to have done the same shady practice in 2017. After announcing a buyback program, within 23 days, CEO Andrew Wilson sold shares for $2.1 million at prices between 12% and 19% higher than they were before the announcement. Both companies have since released statements denying wrongdoing, but the SEC chairman had a different opinion on these practices that many top companies are taking part in. Isn't it market manipulation for a company to say, we're doing a buyback, and then an officer says, I'm going to sell? And another non-surprising turn of events, you have some of gaming's greediest publishers and their executives taking part in shady business, making boatloads of cash because they have no morals. It's worth mentioning earlier this year, both Bobby Kotick and Andrew Wilson found themselves on the list of the top 100 overpaid CEOs, with Kotick landing at 45 and Wilson at 98. Pretty impressive, I gotta say. Activision Blizzard has also faced enormous scrutiny for doing the best to avoid paying taxes this year. Essentially, dirty game companies do dirty things. But finally, we move on to the last part of this video, and that's the gameplay in the background. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, I gotta say, it's the best Star Wars game in years, which doesn't really say much as this last decade Star Wars in gaming has been a giant disappointment, but Jedi Fallen Order is a fun mashup of games like Tomb Raider, Uncharted, Dark Souls, God of War, and probably Titanfall. I've already finished the main story, only took somewhere around 15 hours to do, but I gotta say I thought the story was solid, although definitely felt a little short. To be fair, there is a lot of exploration and side content that I have not gotten to yet. The game also has some interesting new lore and characters that are introduced. Combat was fun, challenging at times. Exploration is rewarded in the form of cool customization, which is a breath of fresh air in this macro transaction dominating age. Level design was a little frustrating but got better as I got used to it. The game graphically is beautiful with some good variety, although there are some issues as I did experience some lag, textures flickering, and a few crashes. Overall, it's without a doubt the first Electronic Arts Star Wars game that actually is worth your time day one this generation. But I still find it extremely ironic. 2 years ago, Electronic Arts said nobody liked linear games anymore, which is why they canceled Visceral's Uncharted-like Star Wars game, and yet here we are 2 years later with a Star Wars game that is pretty linear and appears to be a giant success in terms of reception and likely sales. Anyway, we discussed a ton of gaming news, and I want to know what's your opinion on Google Stadia and Jedi Fallen Order. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter, giving opinions on news that I do not always get into video form, so do make sure to follow me over there. Also check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games. And again, thank you for joining, consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.